On the 6th of August 2025, parliamentarians across the Roblox UK government roleplay BUK gathered in the House of Commons to vote on a single motion: authorization of military action against the Roblox State of Israel. They were voting on that motion because earlier that day, the outgoing Israeli Prime Minister, Newsarks, had leaked a cache of highly classified files from the country's spy agency, the Mossad. The files revealed stunning details of a conspiracy by British officials to orchestrate false flag terrorist attacks across the BUK Roblox server, with the intention of blaming Russia, another Roblox group, as a casus belli for war. Calling them stupid, genocide-larping imperialist wankers, the British Prime Minister also directed the head of MI6, the BUK's Foreign Intelligence Service, to go in there and target every Russian. Kill them all, according to leaked screenshots. The player base of the BUK were outraged by the files, not because they revealed a conspiracy by their own government to attack its own citizens, but rather because they implicitly revealed that the British government had among them a Mossad spy. The files indicated that the mole had access to, among other things, top-secret MI6 communications, British cabinet group chats, and confidential diplomatic cables. It didn't take long for both the media and British officials to find the source of the leak, former Foreign Secretary Tarzan Love. Nor did it take long for the server's news outlets to begin manufacturing consent on overdrive. That Appleby calls for war against Israel. Smite them all, wrote one newspaper. This is an article for a Roblox group only, and is not designed to be reflective of real life. This article contains the opinions of the editor. The Appleby is an impartial company. On the floor of the House of Commons, the Social Democratic leader and British Prime Minister, Wajir called on his colleagues to vote for military action.
We are going to end the terrible regime of the Israeli government that has plagued UNV for so long, UNV being the name of our United Nations. And may I remind everyone right now, this is not simply us trying to warmonger, this isn't us trying to do it for the sake of it. This is something that has built up over time. And I don't think it would be appropriate at all to let this one slide. I have tried time and time again to be diplomatic with every single nation, and that includes Israel. And if they really feel like they can get away with sending a Mossad agent through the government, and over time, I will say right now, Tarzan, who's now been removed as an MP, I deeply apologise to the House for hiring him at all. That man, he was a known member of BUK when I first hired him into the government, and he worked in the press, he worked his way through the government, he worked as a minister, and then worked his way up. And then I find out that so there's during a point after he's been hired, probably a good few weeks after it, I'm assuming, it turns out he's been part of Mossad. And it is a deep, deep regret of mine that he was ever hired, and I apologise profusely to this house. So how can we make amends for it? Bomb the hell out of them. Please vote aye.
Sitting opposite the Prime Minister was the Conservative leader of the opposition, Sketchbook. Sensing a brewing political scandal over the issue, he pressed the Prime Minister on Tarzan's appointment. The British public deserve answers, he said. How was this allowed to take place at such a high level of government? The Prime Minister must stand before this House, not with excuses, but with resignations, starting with his own if he cannot explain this utter failure of state security. He then posed a provocative question. What proof did the Prime Minister have that he himself was not compromised by the Roblox State of Israel?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know why he's trying to insinuate that I'm compromised by Israel when I'm trying to declare war on them. No, I'm not giving way because I'm not an agent of Israel. That is an incredibly stupid accusation. Mr. Speaker, when I was in opposition at the time that man tried to warmonger against North Korea, I didn't come up here and say he was an agent of the North, did I? Because that's incredibly stupid, isn't it? So... You did. But I didn't say he was an agent of theirs, did I?
You did.
On the opposition benches, be quiet. Let the Prime Minister speak.
Mr. Speaker, it's completely... I don't know why my jumping's going like that. Can someone fix it? This is actually pretty fun. But Mr. Speaker, I didn't say he was an agent of North Korea. All I said was that he warmongered. Okay, so I don't know why they're trying to say that. But listen, look, we just got to vote to go to war with Israel. We've got to get this done, and I'm pretty sure, just to make it clear, I'm pretty sure everyone internationally is really, really gonna like us when we do this, because no one likes Israel. They have been a terrible member of the UN. They have been terrible to all of us, and in regards to our recognition of Jerusalem as their capital, that was this government actively trying to still, despite offences caused to this government, in our post where we recognised Jerusalem as Israel's capital, that was in a post where we said, you've been incredibly rude, and we're only adhering to one of your demands, that's recognising Jerusalem as a capital, simply because it was a sign of goodwill that whilst we condemn their actions completely for being rude to everyone, we are fine to rekindle, because it was at a time where they moved Prime Minister again, where the cabinet removed theirs again after he did such inappropriate actions. So, the UN's sick of Israel. We're sick of Israel. Frankly, I can't think of someone apart from Israel who isn't sick of Israel. So yeah, vote aye. And no, I'm not an agent of theirs. And we're going to pursue regular background checks on every single government MP to make sure this never happens again.
The House of Commons voted on the motion after the Prime Minister's speech. They voted in favour of military action. Britain was now at war with the Roblox state of Israel. Okay, hold up. What does war even mean in this context, you may be asking? How does war work on Roblox? In short, both the BUK and the Roblox State of Israel were members of a UN roleplay called the UNV, the United Nations Verse, an international body made up of lots of other independently run Roblox nations called Ro Nations. Membership of an international body like the UNV plays an important role in the Ro Nation sphere because it lends a specific roleplay group legitimacy. There are, after all, many roleplays claiming to be the true British government, or the true Israeli government of Roblox. Being recognised as the British government, or the Israeli government, is the reason why many Ro nations fight for the right to be represented in the Roblox United Nations. It is in this context that the UNV allows its member states to fight wars with one another, which essentially involves the UNV admins plopping players of both sides into a battlefield and having them duke it out in a first-person shooter. As part of the UNV Rules of War, member states are required to submit their war demands, a series of legally binding actions that would be taken if they won the war. And the British government made its demands loud and clear. It wanted the full annexation of southern Israel, the total destruction of its intelligence services and the IDF, and the heads of the Mossad leadership. Joining the British were the Roblox French Republic, Project Gallia. With grievances of their own right, including allegations that the Mossad had infiltrated France with spies of their own, the French government demanded the full annexation of northern Israel. It also demanded the right to try all Israeli leaders in a Parisian court, the demilitarization of Israeli-occupied Lebanon, and the destruction of the Knesset, the Prime Minister's office, and all other governmental buildings through airstrikes. As news of the Anglo-French declaration spread across the UN, Ro nations began issuing diplomatic communiques concerning their positions on the war. The United States, which Israel had considered their closest ally, publicly declared its neutrality on the war, stating only that it was ready to broker peace between the UK and Israel when they decide to. A slew of nations, meanwhile, immediately jumped on the condemn Israel train. France, Taiwan, Malaysia, Uruguay, Denmark, Bangladesh, and Canada all voted in favour of a failed resolution to expel Israel from the United Nations. Russia, which had seemingly learnt of the British plot to attack its civilians and infiltrate its intelligence services through the Mossad files, thanked Israel by breaking off all diplomatic relations with it, expelling all of its diplomats, and recognising the Roblox state of Palestine. Okay, technically this was done because of a previous diplomatic spat it had with Israel, but Russia never bothered restoring relations even after the files came to light. The stage was set for a grand battle between the Anglo-French alliance, with moral support from a plethora of countries and covert support from Malaysian intelligence, and the internationally isolated Roblox state of Israel. And the Anglo-French alliance lost their first battle badly. When we deployed, we were trying to figure out where the hell the enemy is, the French president later recalled. Our forces were facing the wrong direction even, and we were outflanked. It was a horrific defeat. As part of the war, Israel had also issued its war demands. It demanded that France give independence to New Caledonia, French Polynesia, and Corsica, and it demanded that the UK hand over the Falkland Islands to Argentina, grant Northern Ireland independence, and hand over all of its overseas territories to be occupied by Israel. As news of the Israeli victory spread across the BUK, panic began to spread. Oh my god, the UK is going to lose all of its overseas territories. In the next session of Parliament, the leader of the opposition grilled the government over its prosecution of the war.
So, Mr. Speaker, how is it that this so-called competent Prime Minister of yours was able to agree terms in which we would lose absolutely everything apart from Great Britain itself? And then also, I would like to add, the conflict itself, BAF has been under your management for 2 months now. Soldiers running around only wearing tunics. They have no equipment. And why is this? You can't blame it on military incompetence. And if so, you're responsible for that. You've been in charge of them for many months now. And if it was myself, I was in charge of the BAF during the North Korean War. Not in charge, sorry. I was the Foreign Secretary. They did their work splendidly. Maybe shutting down UKSF wasn't a good idea. The Prime Minister has continually been incompetent, unable to do his job properly. He got his manifesto and policies from a SOLVS document, and he is unfit to rule and hasn't got a clue what's going on. He is a man who likes to yap in Parliament, who likes to argue in general, who likes to argue in Parliament feed, who likes to rant about me in his party press releases. But he is not one for doing any work which will get the UK moving anywhere. And he has brought us to this point now where we are totally screwed unless we can have serious work done, which he has failed to deliver on time and time and time again.
The first Secretary of State, in response, blamed alleged bias on the part of the UNV's war team for causing coalition forces to have a severe equipment and preview disadvantage. In response to the loss of the first battle of the war, the leader of the opposition tabled a motion of no confidence against the government. A motion of no confidence was a mechanism that allowed the House of Commons to remove a sitting Prime Minister and their cabinet from power. For it to pass, a simple majority of the House needed to vote in favour. That was a tall order. Wajir party, the SDP, won a landslide in the last election, and his party controlled a majority of seats in the House of Commons. As the leader of the opposition called on the Social Democrats to depose their own leader, the first Secretary of State remained defiant.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know what the right honourable gentleman opposite is, what's going on between those two ears of his, but I can assure not just him, but this entire House, that every member of Parliament sitting behind me has full and complete confidence in the Prime Minister as both Prime Minister and as leader of the Social Democratic Party. Mr. Speaker, if that wasn't the case, he would not be in that position. He has the confidence of the parliamentary party, of the membership, so he will remain as leader.
At the conclusion of the debate, the Speaker declared a division. As MPs gathered in the lobbies, the votes were tallied and the results were announced.
I'm excited to see
The eye, the right, 11. The nose to the left, 9.
Yeah! Let's go. Yeah.
As the vote, hold on. As the vote stands. As the vote stands. Motion of no confidence has passed.
Oh, that's hilarious.
As the teller said, I will take the point of order from the Prime Minister before we go on to the adjournment debate.
What is this? What is this?
I'm not gonna lie.
Get out of my house. Empress Kuma, get out now.
The Prime Minister was out, his own government brought down by one of his ministers. As it later turned out, this betrayal was allegedly bought by the leader of the opposition himself. Holroyd, the Deputy Finance Minister, was still angry at his boss for demoting him after a cabinet reshuffle. According to Holroyd, Sketchbook promised him his old job back if he changed sides. He obliged. Having lost the confidence of the Commons, Wajibadja tendered his resignation to the king. On the 21st of August 2025, his arch-rival Sketchbook took the mantle. He would remain caretaker Prime Minister until an election could be held later that month. For the Roblox State of Israel, it was a double victory. Not only had it won the first battle of the war, it had toppled the British government. But Israel wasn't done yet, for it had another trick up its sleeve. You see, the Roblox Mossad didn't just operate in the UK, it operated elsewhere as well. France's allegations that the Mossad were spying on them were entirely founded, and we know this because they had a wiretap of sorts hidden inside the French Foreign Ministry, allowing them to eavesdrop on conversations the French government would have preferred to be kept private.
Yeah, so for the uranium stuff, I want to do that because I can't lie, I'm working on some
What?
Okay. So between us, we're kind of working strictly under the international law to integrate our nuclear capabilities from submarine base to more land based as well. So silos, etc. Which is perfectly legal. So yeah, I don't know. We don't even need uranium because we're not building any nukes. But yeah, it's just for trade, like I said.
On the 17th of August 2025, the Mossad director Rader dropped a bombshell announcement. The Mossad had intelligence confirming that the French government attempted a clandestine infiltration of the United States Congress, intending to influence legislative decisions in favour of French strategic interests. According to Rader, recovered communications indicated senior French officials sanctioned operations targeting members and staffers of the US Congress, placing assets within congressional offices and engaging with third-party lobbyists to advance French policy priorities. The United States may have declared its neutrality, but that position was unacceptable for Israeli officials. One way or another, Israel was determined to drag the United States into war. Feared. That was how allies and adversaries alike described Israel's spy agency, the Roblox Mossad. Under Rader's leadership, the Mossad was empowered to pursue an extraordinary mandate to spy on virtually every member state of the Roblox United Nations. No nation, friend or foe, was above the Mossad's suspicion. As future Israeli Prime Minister Dad State recalled, a lot of countries had paranoia that the people joining their groups were Mossad agents and might have banned people for being too suspicious. When French counterintelligence realized that the Mossad had a source within its foreign ministry, it engaged in a frantic search for the mole. Over the course of 2 weeks, it reportedly identified over 8 persons of interest and detained 3 people under national security legislation. The French government did not skimp on fanfare when it finally announced it had caught the mole, posting a highly dramatized video depicting the arrest of its ambassador to the UN, not Robbie, Foreign Affairs spokesman Ein Spartan vowed retribution, stating Israel will pay for their offences far beyond human comprehension. It later turned out that the French government got the wrong guy. The Mossad also possessed an extraordinary influence over Israeli domestic politics. On the 30th of July, it launched a coup d'etat with the defense ministry to overthrow the sitting Israeli prime minister. Citing false and highly exaggerated claims that its prime minister had issued an unauthorized declaration of war against every nation of the UN, the Mossad unilaterally declared that it no longer recognized the directives of the prime minister and suggested that it, or the defense ministry, was going to execute the prime minister for their purported violations of Israeli basic law. By the time Radar issued their 17th of August press release, though, things had rapidly deteriorated for the Roblox Mossad. For one, its coup had severely destabilized Israeli politics. In the span of a month, Israel saw 5 separate prime ministers as ambitious cabinet members vied for the post. The instability created a crisis of the Mossad's own making. Remember the files that exposed the former British Foreign Secretary? That came about because Newsarks, the outgoing Prime Minister, leaked the files in revenge for his ousting. That, in turn, plunged Israel into a war it didn't want and took out their highest level asset in the UK. Suddenly, the Israeli government was operating in the dark. It no longer knew what the British were planning. 3 days later, something even more disastrous happened. Its Prime Minister, Socha, had defected to France. Disillusioned by the state of Israeli politics, French intelligence hired Socha to be their eyes and ears within the cabinet. Upon becoming Prime Minister, Socha pilfered as many classified materials as they could and sent them over to Paris. For the French, it was the retribution they had promised to deliver. For the Israelis, it was a catastrophic intelligence failure, one that I've already written about here for my Patreon and YouTube members, hint hint. The leak of the Socha files kneecapped the Mossad's capabilities. Its mole within the French Foreign Ministry was whisked away by French security services. Its mole within the UNV's ostensibly neutral war team was pushed into premature retirement. Its plans and operations stretching from Kosovo to Nepal were laid bare for France and her allies to see. Israeli officials tried to put on a brave face. They accused Paris of mounting a theatrical disinformation campaign once Socha's defection came to light. But behind closed doors, the Israeli government faced a reckoning. Without advanced knowledge of the British and French government's plans, and without the supposed edge received from having a spy embedded in the UNV's war team, the Israeli Defense Forces would struggle to win further battles of the war. They needed allies fast. They needed US intervention. 9 long hours after Radar's press release, the US State Department gave its response. The US, in coordination with the French government, has reviewed the allegations raised by the Israeli government. Through diplomatic channels, it has been confirmed that the French government had no involvement in, nor did it plan to execute, any of the actions referenced in the documents released by Israel. Oh, the US was not coming to Israel's aid. But the US State Department went further. Israel's misguided attempt at a false flag operation aimed at undermining US-French relations is deeply concerning and risks fueling unnecessary instability. The United States maintains a position of neutrality in the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Anglo-French coalition, and we are committed to preserving that stance. As it turned out, the Mossad's claims that it had evidence of French operatives infiltrating the US Congress were a complete fabrication. It had no such evidence. Instead, the Mossad attached random irrelevant screenshots to a document and called it a day. It was as if they had hoped the US wouldn't bother checking the evidence they said they had, and instead would be so blinded by rage that they would end up joining the war on Israel's side. It was a foolhardy gamble, and one that undermined the Mossad's international credibility. Battles 2 and 3 happened in quick succession, and both were victories for the Anglo-French coalition. The tide of the war had dramatically turned, and in a best-of-5 series, the coalition only had to win one more battle to win the war. Desperate for any reprieve, the Israeli government looked elsewhere. Its prime minister eventually secured a meeting with the German government, one of the very few major states that had made no comment thus far. The facts at this point were clear as day. The very existence of Roblox Israel was at stake. If they lost this war, it would be, for all intents and purposes, the end of the Roblox State of Israel. Britain and France's war terms were unbelievably harsh. They mandated the total occupation of their country by Anglo-French forces, the capture of all of its officials to face war crime trials, and the widespread destruction of its server assets. It can be argued that the Roblox Republic of Germany owed a historic responsibility to safeguard the security of the Israeli state. Israel's existence, after all, formed the basis of its Staatsräson, or in English, its raison d'être. How could Germany, in good conscience, continue to sit idly by? Ultimately, we don't know what motivated Germany's decision that day. What we do know is what happened after that meeting. As the Roblox BBC reported, the German president announced it was preparing aid for the Israeli population and military support in the case the Israeli war escalates. Germany was intervening militarily. When news broke of Berlin's decision, the French president and the British prime minister immediately scrambled to contact their German counterpart. What the hell was Berlin thinking? One 90-minute call later, and the German president U-turned on their decision. They were no longer supporting Israel in any capacity. As the BBC reported, the French president told the German president that Germany was riddled with Mossad spies. These alleged spies, who may or may not have actually existed, supposedly steered the German government towards a war with France. When Israel's Prime Minister Dad State learnt of Germany's U-turn, they reacted with anger. Germany was the one that approached Israel first with a plan to intervene, Dad State said. Leaking screenshots of their texts, Dad State alleged that the German government planned to send spies into France with the goal of gathering information to use as blackmail against France. This blackmail, it was hoped, would allow Germany to force France to end its war against Israel, or, failing that, provide a pretext for German military action. With no intervention forthcoming, and with the fourth battle looming, the Roblox State of Israel pulled out its final trump card: lawfare. On the 24th of August 2025, they submitted a case to the UNV's International Court of Justice, alleging that Britain and France had planned to commit war crimes against Israel. Citing Article 51.2 of the First Protocol to the Geneva Convention, lawyers for the Israeli state argued that Britain and France planned to attack civilian targets with the intention of spreading terror among the civilian population. Their evidence? Britain and France's war terms. France had demanded the total destruction of the Knesset, the Prime Minister's office, the President's office, and the office of Israel's government ministries. Britain had demanded the destruction of the Mossad, Amman, Shin Bet, and IDF headquarters. These were civilian targets, they argued. Their destruction would be a breach of the Geneva Convention. Britain and France immediately mobilised their legal teams to fight the lawsuit. In its counter-memorial, the British Solicitor General calmly explained that none of those buildings were civilian targets. They noted that the supposedly civilian Israeli Prime Minister was actually a member of the IDF, posting evidence that showed they killed at least 6 players and died 12 times in one battle. In its legal arguments, the French government repeatedly refused to call Israel by its name, instead referring to it as the unrecognised applicant state, owing to its official policy of non-recognition. Israel's arguments were weak, and they knew it. A week later, they withdrew their case against the BUK. Without a compelling case to intervene, the International Court of Justice elected not to issue an emergency stay against the fourth battle. The battle must go ahead as scheduled on the 30th of August, 2025. At 16:26 hours, the Roblox BBC broadcast one of its most consequential transmissions. All gone? All but one Israeli has left the battlefield. This is weird. It appears they've forfeited and we have won the day and the war. 10 minutes later, British Prime Minister Sketchbook declared victory. Today will forever be known as Victory in Israel Day. Britain has come out victorious over the State of Israel at 16:30 on the 30th of August 2025. Israel forces surrendered, forfeiting the battle. There is now a nationwide manhunt by British armed forces to execute Tarzan Love. Everything is going to the British Museum. It is a great British victory. God save the King. As players of the BUK jubilantly celebrated their victory over Israel, they gathered together for another important event in the server's history, the August 2025 general election. It was a culmination of a week's worth of political campaigning by the roleplay's politicians. Just a week before, these politicians had a chance to appeal to voters directly during an election debate, making their cases for why they deserved to be Britain's next Prime Minister.
Okay, I feel like I'm best suited to talk on this as I've been attacked. I feel...
You two have started. Let me start.
As election day turned to night, players began gluing their eyes to the screens to watch the night's historic events unfold. There was everything you could have wanted from an election night. There were the blocky pundits ready to ask the tough questions.
Given that this exit poll, and we do have to stress it's an exit poll, it's not the final result, given it shows that you're predicting your predicted 4 seats, you can't really hold the balance of power. So do you think that unity, in a way, will be irrelevant in the next parliament? Or do you think it will retain its relevance in some form?
There were the political shocks of the night, as voters delivered their rebuke of two-party politics.
We're getting reports that the result in North Yorkshire is close. That's where the Prime Minister is running.
Don't say it's too close to call.
And it's an NDP game. The Prime Minister has lost his seat to the NDP.
Oh dear.
And of course, there were the politicians who acted a lot like politicians.
What do you want to change?
I can't release that now. It'll be in the King's Speech.
Well, no. What do you want to reform in the Lords, and what do you want to reform in the electorate?
Again, you're going to be very excited to see the King's Speech.
I don't care about the King's Speech. Okay, you've got this Secretary of State. All right, he's being paid a government salary. What's his job going to be? What are you reforming?
Look, it's actually part of this. I don't think I can say. To be honest,
you can't say what a government employee is going to be doing.
Well, the government employee will write legislation on the department, and he's going to do a great job.
That's why you have civil servants. Civil servants are paid to write legislation, not government employees.
Well, it's good to have someone that's wholly focused on the issue.
Well, yeah. But what's he going to be doing? What electoral and what Lords reform do you have?
Okay, I can get up the spread. I can get up the sheet if you really want me to, but it'll take me a minute. But like I said, the King's Speech will have it all down there. If I can find the sheet now, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Probably not.
You're the Deputy Prime Minister. You can say it if you want. They can't go without you, Dragon. So why don't you just tell us what Lords and electoral reform means?
Well, let me just find it. Anyway, can I just say what an honour it is to serve in such a prestigious government under Sketchbook?
Yeah, it would also be an honour to hear what Lords and Electoral Reform means.
On the 31st of August 2025, the Unionists, the right-wing National Democrats, and the centrist Unity Party formed a coalition government with Sketchbook remaining as Prime Minister. To celebrate, the cabinet took an official photo to commemorate the occasion. They had finally done it. They had broken months of SDP rule. The government would collapse 24 hours later. As for the Roblox state of Israel, under the UNV's rules of war, they were now required to comply with Britain and France's war demands. Their leaders were to be sent to Paris to face war crime trials. Their territory was to be annexed by Britain and France, and their governmental buildings were to be reduced to pixelated rubble. Israel, however, opted to take another option. They withdrew from the United Nations. Without jurisdiction to carry out any of the demands Britain and France thrust upon the supposed-to-be Israeli rump state, all the UNV could do was shake their head when the two pressed their territorial claims. Israel was no longer a member state of the UNV, and as such could not have its territory annexed by the coalition, as it did not exist. It was as if the coalition's war against Israel had never happened, making this entire saga a complete waste of everyone's time.